Hello, my name is Andrew Rothman, and I'm making this video to walk you through a lesson sequence that I created that focuses on the concept of lists. And this is a curriculum that I use as a professor at University of San Francisco. I teach an intro to computer science for non-majors. So the idea is, well, it's a low floor class, meaning that everyone should feel successful. It's a high ceiling class, in that everyone who wants to be challenged should be able to be challenged. Use some block coding languages and kind of mix and match between the curriculums to try to get a sequence where students get the chance to practice a concept and then apply them meaningfully in an app concept, which will show their understanding of the concept. So if you want to get to this document and all the links, you can just check out this URL right here. And so before we get into lists, a concept that we'll start with, and what's the second unit of this curriculum, is conditionals. And the students build an app called the Warriors Slideshow. And it's a pretty straightforward app where students are clicking a button to move through a series of images, in this case, different players on the Golden State Warriors. And the main takeaway here is to set up the condition that's being checked within the if statement, and then using the else if. And it's working. If the app is working, it will look basically like this. So you start at the first image, second, third, and then should come all the way back around to the first using a series of else ifs and else. And so that's the setup. Unit 3 students are learning about functions and games. When we get to this Unit 4, where the lists are introduced, then the first activity builds directly on the Warriors slideshow. So instead of doing the slideshow with focusing on the if statements, this is where I introduce lists. And so within this, students learn how to initialize a list and use an index variable, and to use the next button to move through. And then the last sort of important piece is to learn about the length of function to figure out when the index is at the end of the list, so it should go back around to the first. And so this is a tutorial activity, meaning that I usually walk through this lesson with students, and we code together so that they can see, well, one, where to find everything within this coding environment, but also just to get a first run to get comfortable with the concepts. And so the functional app should look like this. And we'll add an additional element, which is a second list, to show students that you can run two lists like in concert. So you have the image and the label. And so those are the big takeaways from the introduction. They'll build a series of apps that get progressively more difficult. So there's a lesson that focuses on applying lists to build a Magic 8-Ball app. And so with the Magic 8-Ball, it's pretty straightforward, and the main takeaway is just how to initialize a list and how to populate the positions within a list. So there's a challenge to use an accelerometer. Where's the list itself? Sorry. So we have the list here, and when the button is clicked, it will find a random. It'll just like a random 8-ball. It'll find a random item in the list. But the key is just for students to learn for themselves, or to apply for themselves, initializing a list and populating a list. And from there, they go to a more complicated app. I will call this one the tourist app, and students will pick locations in San Francisco and get images. And the idea being the new concept that's building on top of this is not just to be able to loop forward through a list using the length of list property, but also to learn how to go backwards through the list. So that's a challenge that they have to work out. And it looks like this is it. So let's see what this one looks like. So we're starting off with Coit Tower, moving through to Alcatraz, Golden Gate Bridge, and going forward, but also that they learn how to go back. Some additional challenges are to add like a clock component that will turn this into a an automatic slideshow. So this should move every 2 seconds or so. And so they're challenged to apply that concept as well. And then the last challenge app in the sequence is to build we'll call it the CS Innovators app. And so it's a quiz app where students are now programming multiple, I think 3 lists concurrently, and then they're learning to check values of lists. Text that the user will put in a value into a text input, and they can check that against a list, and then set up an if statement to handle that. So if we start off on the intro screen, it should look something like this, and then they click through, and so this would be Grace Hopper. Correct. And they would move through, and movie. Correct. And then if they get this wrong, so let's even though this is Alan Turing, but say we spell it wrong. No, try again. Okay, well, let's get this correct this time. Correct. Alrighty, and then the final screen here that they can go back and such. So that's the last sort of guided lesson that they put together themselves. And then the sequence ends with this opportunity to build a creative quiz app. So I want them to build the quiz app from scratch, but with their own images and answers and questions. And so one thing they start off with is to look at the previous work from a previous semester. So I use this tool called Padlet, and students can post, well, the expectation is that students will post their work so they can get feedback from their peers and then iterate, but then also that we can show, then this can be used to give other students, before they build their quiz app, ideas about, well, maybe things that a quiz app that they want to create, but also what are realistic parameters. So how far did other people take this project? So what's the low floor? What would it look like just to meet the basic expectations, and what's the high ceiling? How far could you go with this? And so they get to check out other kids' apps. So this one, okay, so this is about I think some women in STEM. So let's see, May Jemison. Oh, okay, did I not spell it right? Okay, well, a little more complicated here than perhaps for this time. So that is a sequence that shows that this is how I teach the concept of lists through a series of activities.